My parents didn't disown me for failing, they disowned me for teaching. My mother said it calmly, like she was stating a fact. You chose to be a lowly teacher. That was the word she used, lowly. After that, I wasn't invited to dinners. I wasn't mentioned to friends. I wasn't in family photos. It wasn't loud. It was quiet erasure. For 4 years, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't try to prove that shaping children's lives mattered. I just built mine. Then one afternoon, I received a formal email from the Virginia Capitol. 3 weeks later, I was standing inside the House chamber. Cameras were live, educators filled the room, and the governor was holding a printed list of names. My parents were there too, not because they supported me. Because they thought success was finally respectable. They sat near the aisle, dressed for photographs, ready to step into the spotlight. Then the governor looked up, paused, and said my full name, and in that exact second, my mother stood up to join me on stage, only to realize she wasn't authorized to be there. Because when I submitted the official, family acknowledgement list, I didn't include her. What happened next wasn't revenge, it was recognition, and it happened live. The sentence that ended my place in my family wasn't shouted. It wasn't said in anger. It wasn't even said to my face. It was typed. Ingrid chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer see her as my daughter. That was the entire announcement. No context, no argument, no private conversation beforehand. Just a message in a family group chat I had already been quietly removed from. I found out because my cousin Rachel couldn't live with the silence. It was the night before Mother's Day. I remember that detail because I was grading spelling tests at my kitchen table, red pen in hand, circling, definitely. For the 4th time that evening when my phone vibrated, Rachel's name lit up the screen. "Are you home?" she asked. Like someone holding something heavy in both hands. "Yes," I said slowly. "Why?" A pause. "Ingrid, I need to send you something. And I need you to promise me you won't react until you read all of it." My stomach dropped before the screenshots even arrived. When they did, I stared at them for a long time before my brain allowed the words to arrange themselves into meaning. The group name at the top read, Fairbanks Family Dinner. I wasn't in it. Below that, my mother's profile photo, pearls, soft lighting, her country club smile. And then the message. Reminder, Mother's Day dinner at the Jefferson, 7 p.m. All my successful children will be there. Ingrid chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer see her as my daughter. Please don't mention her name tomorrow. Below it, Victoria, Bradley, understood, Mom. That was it. 3 responses, 2 confirmations, 1 erasure. I didn't cry. That part surprises people when I tell this story. They expect tears. But the truth is, something inside me went very still. When humiliation reaches a certain level, it stops feeling sharp and starts feeling cold. My mother had always valued status. Status wasn't just preference for her, it was oxygen. She wore it, displayed it, measured it. The Westbrook Country Club membership had been her crowning achievement after my father's early retirement. The waiting list alone was 3 years. The initiation fee cost more than my annual salary. She told people it was about networking. It wasn't. It was about belonging to the right room. Victoria made that easy. My older sister became a plastic surgeon in Richmond. Her Instagram feed looked like a lifestyle magazine. Charity galas. Designer gowns, filtered champagne glasses. Bradley followed the script too. Corporate attorney in DC, high-rise office, luxury car, strategic marriage. And then there was me, the explanation. The youngest is in education, my mother would say at luncheons, smiling as if she were discussing a hobby instead of a career. Education wasn't impressive. It wasn't photogenic. It didn't elevate her social currency. I hadn't chosen teaching because I lacked options. I had graduated high school with a 4.1 GPA and a full scholarship offer to pursue pre-med at UVA. My mother had told everyone before I even accepted it. She'd purchased a future doctor bumper sticker before I had unpacked my dorm boxes. But that summer I volunteered at a literacy camp in our county. There was a boy named Marcus Jr., 8 years old. 2nd grade, reading at a kindergarten level. He avoided eye contact when asked to read aloud. He called himself dumb before anyone else could. By August, after weeks of patient repetition and encouragement, he finished his first chapter book independently. The pride on his face was not subtle. It was seismic. When he hugged me, he whispered, "I didn't know I could do that." That was the moment I understood something. Teaching wasn't lowly. It was foundational. I called my mother that night to tell her I was declining the pre-med track. There was a 17-second silence on the phone. I counted. "You're throwing your life away," she said finally. "For what? A government paycheck." Not for a paycheck. For meaning. But to her, those two things were the same. The distance between us started there. It didn't explode overnight. It shifted gradually. At Thanksgiving, my seat moved to the smaller table near the kitchen. "You're so good with kids," she said lightly. At Christmas, the scarf I knitted stayed folded in the coat closet while she praised Victoria's Channel clutch for 20 full minutes. When she booked her birthday dinner at a restaurant with limited seating, I was the only one not counted as family. Each moment by itself was survivable. Together, they formed a pattern, a hierarchy, a ranking system where my value sat permanently at the bottom. But even then, I told myself it was temporary. That if I worked harder, earned a master's degree, built programs, proved results, she would see me differently. The night Rachel sent those screenshots, I realized I had misunderstood something fundamental. It was never about achievement. It was about optics. Being a teacher wasn't embarrassing because it lacked impact. It was embarrassing because it lacked prestige, and prestige was the only language my mother spoke fluently. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked quietly through the phone. "Yes," I said. I meant it. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the hurt had clarified something. For years, I had been trying to win a game whose rules were designed to exclude me. Now I understood I didn't have to play. The next morning was Mother's Day. For the first time in my life, I didn't send flowers. I didn't call. I didn't drive the 90 miles to her house to sit politely while pretending nothing was wrong. I made coffee. I graded papers. I went for a walk along the creek behind my apartment complex. And I made a decision. If she no longer saw me as her daughter, I would honor that boundary. But on my terms, I blocked her number, then Victoria's, then Bradley's, not in anger. In alignment, I deleted Instagram. I stopped monitoring the narrative. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I would remove myself completely. The silence that followed was louder than any argument could have been. Months passed. Then Rachel called with updates I hadn't asked for. "They're telling people you're overseas," she said carefully. "In Africa. Some nonprofit education thing." I almost laughed. It sounded more impressive than the truth. Prestige mattered more than honesty. They hadn't erased me because I failed. They erased me because I didn't fit the brand. That night, I created a folder on my laptop titled Proof. I saved the screenshots Rachel sent. Not because I planned to use them, but because erasure only works when there's no record. And I refused to let my own history disappear quietly. I didn't know then that 4 years later, I would stand in the Virginia Capitol. I didn't know cameras would be live. I didn't know the governor would say my name. All I knew was this. If my family required me to shrink to remain loved, I would choose to grow instead. Silently, steadily, without their permission. Because the truth is, being disowned didn't destroy me, it redirected me. And the redirection would change everything. The strange thing about being erased is this. At first, you feel smaller. Then, slowly, you begin to expand. The silence after Mother's Day was clean. Not peaceful, but clean. No tense holiday invitations. No passive-aggressive comments about salary, no subtle comparisons disguised as curiosity. For the first few weeks, I kept reaching for my phone out of habit. Scrolling, checking, waiting for someone to break rank and call me privately. No one did, not my father, not Victoria, not Bradley. Rachel remained the only bridge, and even she tread carefully. "They've reorganized the family chat," she told me one evening. As if there were always only 3 children. That sentence could have hurt. Instead, it clarified something. If they were willing to rewrite history that easily, then my presence had never been conditional, it had been cosmetic. And cosmetics are easily removed. So I redirected my energy. Maple Creek Elementary didn't care about country clubs, it cared about attendance rates, reading scores, and whether kids had eaten breakfast. The building was old, the heating system unreliable in winter, the hallway paint chipped in places where decades of small hands had brushed against it. But when I walked into my classroom each morning, 23 faces turned toward me with expectation, not evaluation. They didn't ask what I drove. They didn't care what my mother thought of my profession. They wanted to know if today we'd read another chapter. That difference grounded me. I began developing a structured literacy mentorship program after noticing the same pattern every year: third graders who had slipped through earlier grades without mastering fundamentals. I stayed late, built tracking sheets, researched intervention models, requested modest grants from the district. Nothing glamorous, no press, just consistent work. By the end of the school year, our literacy proficiency had risen noticeably. Parents sent emails. One mother wrote, "My son reads to his little sister now, he's proud." Pride. That word meant more to me than any applause. 2 years into my self-imposed distance from the Fairbanks name, I met Marcus Webb. It happened on a field trip. His farm, Webb Family Organics, sat on rolling land just outside town. Apple orchards in the fall. Pumpkins line neatly near the barn. My class visited to learn about sustainable agriculture. Marcus met us near the tractor, sleeves rolled, boots dusty. His daughter Lily clung to his hand, 5 years old, golden curls, serious eyes. Her kindergarten teacher later told me Lily had been struggling with reading since her mother passed from pancreatic cancer the year before. Grief doesn't announce itself in children, it hides in quiet corners. After the field trip, Marcus approached me. "Lily talks about you," he said, not flirtatious, just sincere. "She says you make books feel safe." That sentence lingered with me long after the bus left. Safe. Over the next few months, Lily began coming for extra reading sessions twice a week. Marcus stayed during the first few visits, hovering respectfully. Eventually, he trusted me enough to leave her. One evening, after Lily proudly read an entire picture book without stumbling, Marcus lingered in the doorway. "She hasn't smiled like that in a while," he said quietly. "Grief rewires confidence," I replied. "But it doesn't erase potential." He nodded. "You talk like someone who understands that." I didn't elaborate. But he saw something in my silence. Coffee followed, then long walks near the creek behind my apartment. He didn't pry into my family situation. He accepted the sentence, "We're not in contact," without demanding footnotes. That acceptance was disarming. Marcus wasn't impressed by titles. He cared about steadiness, consistency, follow through, qualities that don't photograph well but build real lives. When he proposed 2 years later, it was under the oak tree on his property where Lily had first read aloud confidently. No audience, no spectacle. Just a simple question and a small velvet box. We married there in a ceremony that lasted 15 minutes. Lily scattered wildflowers instead of rose petals. I took his last name legally 6 months later. Ingrid Fairbanks became Ingrid Webb. The paperwork felt symbolic in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not a rejection of where I came from, but a confirmation of where I belong. During that same year, I completed my master's degree in educational leadership. I wrote policy drafts at midnight, studied budget allocations during lunch breaks. My focus sharpened. If I was going to build a life outside my family's approval, it would be a life with measurable impact. When the assistant principal position opened at Maple Creek, I applied. Marcus recused himself from the school board vote to avoid conflict of interest. I earned the role regardless. Leadership didn't feel glamorous. Teacher retention rates were declining statewide. Burnout was real. I developed a mentorship model pairing experienced teachers with new hires, structured weekly check-ins, and realistic workload adjustments. Small systems, quiet systems, they worked. Within 3 years, teacher retention in our district became the highest in the region. Student literacy scores rose by 18%. The numbers weren't dramatic, but they were consistent. Consistency wins reform. Then, one Thursday afternoon, my office phone rang. "Mrs. Webb." The voice said formally, "This is the Virginia Department of Education." I assumed it was a compliance matter. Instead, they informed me that the board had selected me as the incoming superintendent for Clark County Schools. I stared at my desk calendar. 4,000 students. 200 teachers. Are you certain? I asked. We don't make mistakes in announcements like this, the woman replied gently. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a full minute. Then I called Marcus. He didn't congratulate me immediately, he said. You earned this. That distinction mattered. The announcement appeared in a regional newspaper 2 weeks later. A modest headline. Local educator named superintendent. I didn't think it would travel beyond the county. I underestimated how quickly prestige becomes interesting once it meets the right threshold. Rachel called the same evening. They've seen it. My mother had apparently phoned Victoria within minutes of someone forwarding the article. She's furious she didn't know, Rachel whispered. Not proud, furious. The narrative she'd been telling about me volunteering overseas was collapsing. You can't claim your daughter is in Kenya saving children when she's photographed standing beside the Virginia State Board of Education. 2 days later, an email arrived. Subject line, from Mom. No apology, no acknowledgement of the group chat message, just an invitation. Mother's Day is approaching. It would mean so much to have the whole family together. The audacity almost impressed me. 4 years of silence, rewritten as temporary distance. Victoria followed with a phone call from an unknown number. Mom misses you, she said warmly. I asked Rachel if my mother was unwell. She was at the spa yesterday, Rachel replied dryly. That was when clarity fully settled. They didn't miss me, they missed proximity to success. And then came the official invitation from the governor's office. A statewide literacy reform initiative. Our district's mentorship model had been selected for adoption across multiple counties. There would be a signing ceremony at the Virginia Capitol. Live coverage. Key contributors acknowledged. My name on the list. Rachel forwarded another screenshot from the family group chat. My mother had already confirmed their attendance, planned outfits, coordinated arrival times. This is good PR, Bradley had written. Not one message asked if I wanted them there. Not one mentioned reconciliation. They were planning to reattach themselves to my narrative publicly. That night, Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table reviewing the event agenda. There's a family acknowledgement segment, he noted. Yes, I replied quietly. And, he prompted, and only the names I submit will be allowed on stage. I didn't say it with bitterness. I said it with clarity. They had removed me from their family. Now I would define mine. Not through anger, through paperwork. Because sometimes the most powerful boundary isn't shouted, it's documented. The Virginia State Capitol looks different when you walk toward it knowing you belong there. Not because of inheritance, not because of connections, but because of work. The morning of the ceremony was clear and cool. The white columns rose against a pale blue sky, steady and unbothered by the lives unfolding beneath them. Marcus parked a block away so we could walk the rest of the distance together. Lily held my hand on one side. Marcus walked on the other. Are you nervous? He asked gently. No, I said after considering it honestly. Not nervous. That surprised me. 4 years ago, the thought of my mother sitting in a room while my name was announced would have tightened my throat. Now it felt inevitable. Inside, the building hummed with controlled movement. Staffers clipped badges to lapels. Cameras were being positioned at angles that would capture the podium, the governor, and the first 3 rows of seating. I signed in at the registration desk. Superintendent Webb, the coordinator smiled. Your family seating is in the front row, Section A. I nodded. 2 seats had already been reserved beside mine. Marcus Webb, Lily Webb. 3 days earlier, I had met privately with the event coordinator and confirmed something very specific. For security and staging purposes, only pre-registered family members listed by honorees would be permitted on stage during acknowledgments. The coordinator had been polite but firm. We've had incidents before, she explained. It's always better to clarify in advance. Clarity. That word again. As we entered the chamber, I felt it before I saw it. The weight of familiar eyes. My mother sat in the second row, angled slightly toward the aisle. Cream suit, pearls. Controlled posture. Victoria wore red, Bradley had chosen charcoal gray. They had positioned themselves carefully, close enough to appear central, but not so close as to seem presumptuous. Optics mattered to them. They didn't wave when I looked in their direction. They waited. I took my seat in the front row. Lily swung her legs gently, whispering, "Is the governor nice?" "I think so," I said. Marcus leaned close. "Whatever happens, we leave together." That sentence grounded me more than anything else. The ceremony began precisely on time. The governor stepped to the podium, flanked by the Secretary of Education and several board members. His speech was measured, focused on statewide literacy gaps, reform initiatives, and the measurable improvements in districts that had piloted new mentorship structures. He referenced Clark County by name, my district. He spoke about teacher retention, sustainable mentorship systems, and data-backed results. Then he began acknowledging contributors. My name was third. Superintendent Ingrid Fairbanks Webb. He read clearly from the printed program. The sound of my name echoed slightly against the chamber walls. Applause followed, professional, respectful. The camera shifted toward the front row. Marcus squeezed my hand once. Lily beamed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement behind me. My mother had stood. It was subtle at first, just the rise of cream fabric in my peripheral vision. But she didn't remain standing. She began moving toward the aisle. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I heard the soft click of her heels against the marble floor. Security moved before she reached the stage steps. Not forcefully, just positioned. "Mom, family access is restricted to registered names," a staff member said calmly. I felt the air shift. The kind of shift that happens when expectation meets reality. My mother's voice lowered, controlled. "I'm her mother." "Yes, Mom," the staffer replied gently. "However, only listed family members may join the stage." There was no argument loud enough to interrupt the governor's speech, no scene dramatic enough to justify removal. Just a pause. A recalculation. She returned to her seat. The governor continued speaking, unaware, or choosing not to acknowledge, the minor disruption. When it was my turn to approach the podium, my steps were steady. The chamber felt larger from up there. 500 educators, media cameras, state officials, and in the second row, the family that had once declared me lowly. I adjusted the microphone. "Thank you, Governor." I began evenly. Teaching is often described as a profession. I see it differently. The room quieted. It is infrastructure. It is foundation. Every career we celebrate today began in a classroom. A few heads nodded. I continued. 4 years ago, Clark County faced a literacy gap that felt overwhelming. We didn't solve it with slogans. We solved it with systems. With teachers mentoring teachers. With students receiving consistency instead of crisis intervention. I let the words land. "Tonight, I want to thank my family." There it was. The moment they had dressed for. I turned slightly toward the front row. My husband, Marcus, who has supported every late-night budget draft and early morning school visit. Applause. And my daughter, Lily, who reminds me daily why literacy matters. Lily waved shyly. I did not pause for effect. I did not expand the list. I did not glance toward the second row, because the list had already been submitted. The omission had already been formalized. The absence was intentional and complete. Applause swelled more fully this time, less polite, more affirming. When I stepped away from the podium, the governor extended his hand again. "Thank you for your work," he said quietly, off microphone. "Thank you for seeing it," I replied. As we returned to our seats, I felt eyes on my back again, but this time they did not feel heavy, they felt distant. After the signing concluded, attendees filtered toward the reception hall. My mother approached before we reached the doors. Her expression was controlled but tighter than before. She said softly, "I followed protocol," I replied calmly. "You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." Victoria stood slightly behind her, arms folded. Bradley's jaw was set. "You could have at least acknowledged us," Victoria said. I met her eyes. 4 years ago, you acknowledged a message that removed me from the family." Silence. Bradley exhaled sharply. "That was taken out of context." "There was no context," I said gently. "There was a sentence." My mother's composure wavered for the first time. We came here to support you. You came here to be seen supporting me, I corrected quietly. Marcus placed a steady hand at my back. The hallway buzzed around us with polite conversation and clinking glasses. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a clarification. You don't get to decide now that teaching is respectable, I continued. You made your position clear when it wasn't. My mother's lips parted slightly. Because what defense exists for a documented message? We should go, Marcus said softly. I nodded. As we walked toward the exit, Lily slipped her hand into mine. Mom, she whispered, you were the best one up there. I smiled down at her. Thank you. Behind us, the Fairbanks name lingered in the hallway, but for the first time in years it did not follow me. Because sometimes, the most powerful boundary isn't raised in anger. It's enforced through preparation, and today, preparation had spoken for me. The fallout didn't explode. It unfolded, slowly, quietly, socially. The video of the governor's literacy reform signing circulated faster than I expected, not because of me, but because of what happened in the second row. Someone had clipped the moment security redirected my mother. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices. No visible struggle, just a polite barrier and a confused expression that lingered half a second too long on camera. Half a second is enough. Country club circles operate on inference. They don't need headlines, they need doubt. Rachel called 3 days later. Mom hasn't been back to the social committee, she said carefully. People are asking questions. What kind of questions? I asked. The kind that start with "Is it true?" I pictured my mother seated at a polished luncheon table, smile controlled, pearls immaculate, fielding inquiries from women who had built their own lives around curated narratives. Is it true she disowned you? Is it true she called teaching lowly? Is it true she wasn't invited on stage? Questions don't accuse, they destabilize. Victoria disabled comments on her professional page within 48 hours. Bradley declined 2 networking events he would normally never miss. Not because they were being publicly shamed, but because perception had shifted. For years, my family's image had been airtight. Prestige, success, immaculate cohesion. Now there was a visible crack, and cracks invite curiosity. Marcus found me one evening sitting at the kitchen table with the ceremony program in front of me. Regret? He asked gently. I considered that honestly. No, I said. But it wasn't satisfaction either, it was recalibration. When you set a boundary publicly, you don't feel triumph. You feel separation. And separation carries weight. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Cream stationery. Recognizable handwriting. I didn't open it immediately. I placed it on the counter and made dinner. I helped Lily with homework. I watered the herb garden. Only after the house quieted did I sit down and slide my finger under the flap. 2 pages. Handwritten. I have rewritten this letter more times than I can count. It began, not defensive, not strategic, just careful. I was wrong. That sentence surprised me. Not misunderstood, not emotional. Wrong. She wrote about fear, about reputation, about how my career choice had made her feel exposed in rooms where comparison was currency. I mistook prestige for protection, she admitted. I read that line twice. She did not ask for reconciliation. She did not demand forgiveness. She wrote, "You do not owe me access to your life." That part felt the most honest. When Marcus entered the kitchen, I was still holding the letter. Well, he asked quietly. She admitted it. I said, and that doesn't undo it. We sat in silence for a while. The hardest part of estrangement isn't anger, it's ambiguity. If someone remains cruel, the boundary feels justified. If they soften, the boundary feels heavier. Rachel called the following weekend. She's seeing a therapist, she said. I closed my eyes briefly. Good, I replied. You don't sound relieved. I'm not sure relief is the right word. Because healing on her side didn't require access on mine. That distinction mattered. Over the next month, the whispers settled into something more stable. Not scandal. Just awareness. People adjusted their language around my mother. Less admiration. More caution. Prestige built on dismissal is fragile. One evening under the oak tree, Lily climbed into my lap. Why didn't Grandma come to dinner? She asked. The question was neutral. Curious. Children don't inherit grudges, they observe absence. Sometimes adults make mistakes, I said carefully. Like forgetting homework, she asked. Bigger than that. Will she say sorry? She already did. Then why doesn't she come over? I paused. Because the simplest answers are often the truest. Saying sorry and changing are different things, I said softly. Lily nodded, satisfied. Children understand consistency more than apology. That night, after she was asleep, I stood by the window watching the barn light flicker on in the distance. 4 years ago, I had thought being disowned would break me. Instead, it clarified me. But clarity doesn't erase cost. There were holidays I had spent wondering if I was too rigid. There were nights I questioned whether dignity was worth distance. There were moments at school events where I watched other mothers beam in the audience and felt a flicker of something complicated. Not jealousy. Just absence. The governor thanking me on live television had not been revenge. It had been correction. Correction of narrative. Correction of worth. But correction does not rebuild what was dismantled. The letter remained in the kitchen drawer. Unread again. Not discarded, not displayed, just stored. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't an event. It's a pace. And pace cannot be forced. Marcus joined me at the window. You're thinking, he said. About what? That silence costs something, I replied. He nodded. But so does pretending. He was right. If I had allowed them on that stage, if I had nodded politely and folded myself back into their image, I would have paid a different price. One measured in self-erasure. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're calibrations. And calibrations take time to stabilize. 6 months after the ceremony, peace felt less sharp. My office wall held Lily's crayon drawing, 3 stick figures. Yellow sun. No extra seats. When I drove past Westbrook Country Club one afternoon, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt distance. Not emotional distance. Structural distance. Different worlds. Different currencies. My parents disowned me for being a lowly teacher. The governor thanked me on live television. But the real shift happened long before that. It happened the morning I decided I would not argue my worth. Because once you stop auditioning for love, you begin building it elsewhere. And what you build elsewhere cannot be taken away. 3 months after the ceremony, the calls stopped, not dramatically, just gradually. At first, my mother sent 2 follow-up emails, shorter than the letter, more cautious. I hope you're well. I'd like to talk when you're ready. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, out of calibration. There is a difference between hearing an apology and reopening a door. And I was still deciding whether the door needed to exist at all. Rachel remained my quiet informant. Mom's different, she told me one afternoon. Quieter. Embarrassed. I asked. Reflective. She corrected. I wasn't sure whether reflection was transformation or just another stage of image management. People who live by perception rarely abandon it entirely. At school, life continued with its usual rhythm. Budget meetings, teacher evaluations, parent conferences. Normalcy has a way of diluting emotional drama. My work demanded presence. 4th graders still needed reading intervention. High school seniors still needed graduation pathways approved. The literacy mentorship program had expanded statewide after the Capitol event. I was fielding calls from districts asking how to replicate the model. Ironically, the very career my mother had labeled lowly was now shaping policy conversations. The irony did not escape me. One evening, Marcus found me reviewing a proposal for additional funding. You're overthinking, he said gently. I always overthink, I replied. Not about school, he clarified. About her. He didn't need to say her name. She wrote another letter, I admitted. He leaned against the counter. She asked if she could meet Lily. He absorbed that quietly. That's not a small request. No. It wasn't. Introducing a child into unresolved adult history changes the stakes. Lily knew of my mother only in abstract terms. Grandma was a word without context for her, and context matters. I don't want Lily to inherit tension, I said softly. Then don't give her tension, Marcus replied. Give her clarity. Clarity, that word again. The following week I agreed to a meeting. Not at the farmhouse. Not at her house. A neutral location, a small cafe halfway between Clark County and Richmond. Public enough for boundaries. Private enough for conversation. She arrived early. Of course she did. Cream coat, minimal jewelry this time, less armor. She stood when I approached. For a second, we looked at each other without speaking. Time does something strange to familiar faces. It softens some edges and sharpens others. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied. We sat, ordered coffee. There was no script, no immediate accusation. Just two women sharing a table that had once shared a last name. I was wrong, she said again. I know, I replied. She blinked, perhaps expecting resistance. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued carefully. I don't even expect reconciliation. I just want to understand why I made those choices. That was new. Not justification, inquiry. You chose status over relationship, I said evenly. Because status felt safer. She didn't argue. That's true. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't hostile. It was contemplative. I thought, she admitted slowly, that if my children reflected prestige, then I had succeeded. When you chose something different, I felt exposed. Exposed to who? I asked. Everyone, she whispered. There it was. The invisible audience that had dictated so many of her decisions. You disowned me in front of that invisible audience, I said quietly. Not in front of me. Her shoulders lowered. I know. We talked for 45 minutes, no raised voices, no theatrical regret, just facts laid out gently. At the end, she asked the question she had been circling. May I meet Lily? The weight of that question sat heavily between us. She's not a prop, I said calmly. I know. She's not proof of redemption. I know. She won't be introduced to anyone who sees relationships as optics. Her eyes filled. But she didn't cry. I don't want optics anymore. That sentence felt fragile, earnest. But fragility is not proof. I'll think about it, I said. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. She began. Yes. You were never lowly. The words sounded different now, smaller. Stripped of authority. I know, I replied gently. Outside the cafe, the air felt lighter but not resolved. Reconciliation is not a switch. And structures take time to test. When I returned home, Lily ran toward me with a drawing in her hands. Look, Mom. I wrote a whole paragraph by myself. I knelt down and read it aloud with exaggerated enthusiasm. Marcus watched from the doorway. He asked later. Honest, I said. And honesty doesn't erase history. He nodded. So what now? I looked toward the oak tree in the backyard. Now we move slowly. Because the space between apology and access is where boundaries prove their strength. And this time, I intended to build them carefully. After the cafe meeting, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden closeness, no immediate healing, no emotional breakthrough. Just awareness. Awareness that the person who had erased me was now attempting to understand why. And awareness that understanding does not automatically restore trust. For weeks, I carried the conversation with me like a folded note in my pocket. My mother had looked smaller in that cafe. Not physically, but structurally. The certainty she once wore like perfume had thinned. For the first time, she had asked questions instead of issuing conclusions, and that unsettled me more than her original rejection. Because anger is simple. Reflection is complicated. At work, life refused to pause for personal recalibration. Clark County's budget review was approaching, and the literacy program expansion required careful resource allocation. I spent long evenings reviewing spreadsheets, drafting grant proposals. On paper, everything was progressing upward, reading scores steady, teacher retention stable, community engagement improving. Externally, I was the image of leadership. Internally, I was navigating a quieter conflict. The idea of introducing Lily to my mother unsettled me, not because I feared confrontation, but because I feared inconsistency. Children don't analyze nuance. They measure presence, and presence, once promised, must be sustained. One evening, Lily climbed into my lap with a question that seemed harmless. Do you have a mom? The words landed softly but deeply. I said carefully. Where is she? She lives in Richmond. Why doesn't she visit? I paused. Because children deserve truth without adult complexity. Sometimes grown-ups have to learn how to be better at loving. I said gently. She considered that. Is she learning? I think she's trying. That was the most honest answer I could give. Later that night, Marcus and I sat on the porch while the sun folded into the horizon. "You're thinking about letting them meet," he said quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like denying that chance makes me rigid. And the other part thinks I'm protecting something fragile." He nodded. "Protection isn't rigidity," he said. "It's pacing, pacing." There it was again. The difference between reaction and intention. The following week, my mother sent another letter. Shorter this time. "I understand if you choose distance. I will not push. I am continuing therapy. I am learning how much of my identity was built on comparison." Comparison. That word sat heavily on the page. My childhood had been a series of comparisons. Victoria's grades, Bradley's internships, my deviations. Success in our house had never been communal. It had been competitive, and competition requires ranking. I had always ranked last. I met with Dr. Hart 2 days later for a routine statewide planning session. After the meeting, she lingered. "You seem distracted," she observed. I hesitated, then explained the situation in measured terms. She listened without interruption. "When people confront their own ego structures," she said thoughtfully, "it's destabilizing. For them and for you. I don't want to reopen something I worked hard to close," I admitted. "Closure doesn't mean absence," she replied. "It means boundaries with awareness." I sat with that. Boundaries with awareness. Not walls. Not surrender. Intentional design. That evening I called my mother. The silence on the line felt different from the silence 4 years ago. Less charged. More cautious. I began. "I won't pressure you," she said quickly. "I know." A pause. "If you meet Lily," I continued slowly, "there will be conditions." "Of course," she replied immediately. No discussion of the past in front of her. No performative affection for optics. "I deleted my accounts," she said quietly. That surprised me. "Why?" I asked. I realized I was curating instead of living. The admission didn't erase history, but it suggested introspection beyond damage control. "We'll meet in a park," I said finally. "Short visit, thank you," she whispered. Gratitude sounded foreign in her voice. When I ended the call, my hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from magnitude. Second chances carry risk, not because they guarantee harm, but because they reopen vulnerability. The Saturday meeting was simple. A public park in Clark County, neutral open. My mother arrived without pearls, without armor, just a navy sweater and cautious eyes. Lily held my hand as we approached. "This is my mom's mom," I explained gently. Lily looked up, evaluating. She said confidently. My mother knelt to Lily's level. She replied softly, no dramatic tears, no speeches, just introduction. They spent 20 minutes feeding ducks. Talking about school. Books. Lily showed her a chapter she had written independently. My mother listened, not interrupted, listened. When it was time to leave, she didn't ask for more time, she didn't push, she stood. "Thank you for letting me meet her," she said. It wasn't entitlement. Driving home, Lily leaned back in her car seat. "She's quiet," she observed. "Yes," I agreed. "Is she still learning how to love better?" I smiled slightly. "Yes." "Okay," Lily said, satisfied. Children accept growth more easily than adults. That night Marcus and I sat in comfortable silence. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Uncertain." I answered honestly. "Regret?" "No." I looked toward the oak tree again, the place where new life had begun for me. "I don't owe her closeness," I said slowly. "But I also don't owe her permanent exile if she's genuinely changing." Marcus nodded. "Then keep measuring consistency." Consistency, not apologies. Not words. Consistency over time. I understood something that night. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about deciding whether the present behavior aligns with the boundaries you built. 4 years ago, my mother erased me because my career threatened her image. Now she was sitting on park benches, listening to a 6-year-old talk about reading levels. The shift was real, but real doesn't mean complete. Healing is incremental, trust is earned in repetition, and second chances require supervision. As I turned off the lights that night, I realized something important. The governor thanking me on live television had corrected the narrative publicly. But this was correction privately, quieter, harder, more vulnerable, and far more complicated. The second meeting wasn't at a park. It wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. That difference mattered. After the first visit with Lily, my mother did something she had never done before. She waited. No follow-up messages asking when she could come again. No subtle guilt about lost time. No strategic invitations to holiday gatherings. She sent one short text 3 weeks later. I'm available whenever you feel comfortable. Comfortable. It was a word she had never prioritized before. For most of my childhood, comfort had been secondary to appearance. Now it was being offered as a consideration. I didn't respond immediately. I watched. Not for perfection, for pattern. In the weeks that followed, Rachel updated me on something unexpected. Mom stopped going to Westbrook, she said one evening, the country club. She resigned her membership. That stopped me. Voluntarily. Yes, she said she needs to spend less time in rooms where she feels evaluated. That was new language. Not prestige. Not status. Not comparison. Evaluation. For the first time, she wasn't blaming the audience. She was acknowledging her dependence on it. When I agreed to a second meeting, it was at our farmhouse. That decision surprised even me. Not because I had forgiven her, but because I wanted to test something important. How she behaved on my ground. Our home wasn't curated. The barn smelled like hay and machinery. The porch chairs didn't match. The kitchen table had faint crayon marks Lily insisted were decorations. This wasn't a showroom. It was lived in. My mother arrived 10 minutes early but stayed in her car until exactly the agreed time. That detail didn't escape me. She knocked. Not entered. Knocked. When Marcus opened the door, she hesitated before stepping inside. This is beautiful, she said quietly. Not in a performative way, in a surprised way. She noticed the small things. Lily's drawings on the fridge. The stack of school district folders on the counter. The smell of something baking. Normal life. We sat at the kitchen table. No confrontation, just coffee and afternoon light. I won't stay long, she said first. I know. Silence followed, but not the old tense silence. This one felt observational. She was studying the room, not to critique it, but to understand it. I used to think, she began carefully, that success required presentation. It requires consistency, I corrected gently. She nodded. That sentence lingered. Confusion, not malice, not cruelty. Confusion layered with ego and fear. Why now? I asked finally. She didn't deflect. Because I saw myself on that video, she said quietly. Not you. Me. I waited. I saw how small I looked trying to step into something that wasn't mine, and I realized I had done that your entire life. That landed. She wasn't defending, she wasn't reframing, she was naming. I made your choices about me, she continued. Your career, your distance, your silence. I interpreted everything as commentary on my success as a mother. And it wasn't. I said, I know that now. We sat with that. For a long time, I had wanted her to understand, not to agree, to understand. Understanding doesn't undo damage, but it shifts the ground beneath it. Lily ran in from the yard mid-conversation, cheeks flushed. Grandma, look, she said, holding up a small notebook. The word grandma was tentative but natural. My mother's eyes flickered at the title. She didn't overreact. Didn't cry. Didn't perform gratitude. She leaned in. What did you write? She asked softly. Lily read aloud a short story about a girl who planted seeds and waited patiently for them to grow. My mother lections, no corrections. When Lily finished, she smiled gently. That's very good. No comparison. No performance. Just affirmation. After Lily ran back outside, my mother turned to me. I don't expect to be part of your daily life, she said, but I would like to earn a place in it. Earn. That word mattered. Not reclaim. Not assume. Earn. I won't chase approval anymore. I replied calmly. I know. I won't defend my choices. I understand. And if you ever measure me against someone else again, I won't. She interrupted softly. There was no dramatic promise, just a quiet recognition of a boundary. Marcus joined us at the table, not as mediator, as witness. My mother met his eyes. I appreciate the steadiness you've given her, she said. It wasn't defensive, it wasn't comparative. It was acknowledgement. Marcus nodded politely. When she stood to leave, she didn't linger at the doorway. She didn't attempt a long embrace. She simply said, "Thank you for letting me see how you live." After she drove away, I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The house felt the same. But internally something subtle had recalibrated. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Measured," I said. "Relieved?" "Not yet," he nodded. Because relief isn't immediate when trust has been broken. Trust rebuilds through repetition. Through consistency, through absence of old patterns. That evening, as Lily fell asleep, she whispered, "Grandma listened today." "Yes," I said. She didn't try to talk over me. "No, that's good," Lily murmured. Children detect authenticity faster than adults. Later, alone on the porch, I thought about the girl I had been 4 years ago, the one who stared at a group chat message and felt erased. If she could see this moment, this cautious rebuilding, she wouldn't call it reconciliation, she would call it reclamation. Because the power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer auditioning, I was evaluating. And that distinction changed everything. Second chances aren't granted, they're structured. And for the first time in my life, the structure belonged to me. The first holiday after the capital ceremony arrived quietly. No dramatic invitations. No emotional ultimatums. Just a simple message from my mother. "If you're comfortable, I would like to invite you, Marcus, and Lily for Thanksgiving. Just us." The wording was deliberate. Not the family. Not everyone. Just us. 4 years ago, Thanksgiving had been the moment I understood. I no longer had a chair at the table. Now the invitation was being extended without condition. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was angry, because I was careful. Marcus found me rereading the message later that evening. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know. Do you want to?" That was the harder question. Wanting is emotional. Choosing is intentional. "I don't want nostalgia," I said slowly. "I want clarity." "And you think going gives you that?" "I think not going keeps everything frozen in 2020. He nodded. "Then go for clarity. Not for reconciliation." That distinction mattered, so we went. The drive to Richmond felt longer than 90 miles. Memory attaches itself to highways, to landmarks, to the subtle curve before you turn into a familiar neighborhood. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed something immediately. The dining room lights were on, but the folding table near the kitchen was gone. Inside, the house looked the same but felt different. Less curated, more lived in. The formal china had been replaced with simple white plates. No excessive display, just food. My mother greeted us at the door. No pearls, no armor. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said gently. Not overly warm, not distant. Measured. Lily stepped forward first. "Grandma?" The word sounded more natural this time. My mother knelt slightly, not dramatically, and hugged her briefly. Victoria and Bradley were not there. That had been part of the agreement. Small steps. No audience. We sat at the table. 4 adults, 5 chairs. No hierarchy. No smaller place settings, just seating. Conversation moved cautiously at first. Farm weather. The literacy program's expansion. At one point my mother paused. "I watched the reform bill update last week," she said. "The mentorship model has been adopted in 12 additional counties." "Yes," I replied. "It's making a difference." The way she said it wasn't performative pride, it was acknowledgement. "You built something meaningful," she added quietly. 4 years ago, the word meaningful would have been dismissed as insufficient. Now it carried weight. Midway through dinner, Lily spilled cranberry juice. Reflexively, my mother moved to grab napkins. No sigh, no commentary, just cleanup. Small actions reveal more than grand gestures. After dessert, we moved into the living room. The same room where, years ago, I had sat quietly while conversations centered around careers that photographed well. Tonight, the conversation centered around Lily's short story. She insisted on reading it aloud. My mother listened. Actually listened. When Lily finished, she clapped lightly. That was beautifully written, no comparison to anyone else. No redirection, just affirmation. Later, When Lily and Marcus stepped outside to look at the early evening sky, my mother and I remained alone in the living room. The silence wasn't sharp. "I don't expect everything to go back to what it was," she said finally. "It can't," I replied. "I know." She folded her hands. "I'm not asking to be restored to some position, I'm asking to participate differently." That phrasing surprised me. Differently. Not dominantly. Just differently. "You won't be central," I said calmly. "I understand. You won't be consulted on every decision. And if old patterns reappear, I will step back." She met my eyes steadily. "That's fair. Fair." Another word that once would have sounded transactional, now it sounded grounded. "I don't need you to approve of me," I continued. "I need you not to diminish me. I won't." There was no dramatic embrace, no tears, just two adults recalibrating terms. When we stood to leave, my mother handed Lily a small book, not expensive, not symbolic, just a children's novel. "I thought you might like this," she said. Lily grinned. "Thank you." As we drove home, Lily flipped through the pages in the back seat. "Grandma's getting better," she announced. Marcus glanced at me. "Better at what?" he asked her. "At listening." I looked out the window at the darkening road. Listening. It seemed small, but it wasn't. 4 years ago, my mother had listened to an invisible audience instead of her daughter. Now she was listening to a 6-year-old talk about imaginary characters. That shift mattered, not because it erased what happened, but because it demonstrated change in action, not speech. When we arrived home, I walked to the oak tree alone for a moment. The place where I had rebuilt myself, where I had chosen steadiness over approval. The governor thanking me on live television had corrected the public narrative. But this was quieter. More complicated, less triumphant, and more real. I didn't win. She didn't lose. We adjusted, carefully, boundaries intact, access gradual, trust measured, forgiveness ongoing. People expect stories like this to end with either permanent exile or dramatic reunion. Life rarely offers either. It offers maintenance, and maintenance requires awareness. My parents disowned me for being a lowly teacher. The governor thanked me on live television. But the true shift wasn't the applause, it was this. I no longer needed them to validate my worth. And because I no longer needed it, I could decide, calmly and deliberately, what I was willing to keep, and what I was not. A year after the governor thanked me on live television, something unexpected happened. No announcements, no public events, no symbolic holidays, just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing mid-year literacy data when my assistant knocked gently on the door. "There's someone here asking for you," she said. "Do they have an appointment?" I asked without looking up. She hesitated. "It's your mother." I froze, not visibly but internally. We had seen each other on holidays since Thanksgiving, short visits, careful pacing, structured conversations. But she had never come to my office. Never stepped into the professional space she once dismissed. "Send her in," I said calmly. When she entered, she paused just inside the doorway. This time, she wasn't wearing neutral tones or controlled elegance. She looked simple, practical, like someone entering unfamiliar territory without armor. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "You're not," I replied. That was true. My schedule could adjust, my boundaries could not. She glanced around the office. The framed district map, the bookshelf stacked with policy binders, the bulletin board displaying student literacy improvement charts. Lily's crayon drawing was pinned near my desk. 3 stick figures under a yellow sun. "This is where you work," she said quietly. "Wes." She stepped closer to the board with the literacy metrics. "Is this the program the governor referenced?" "Yes." Her fingers hovered near the chart but didn't touch it. "These numbers," she murmured. "Yes." "Not statistics." "No." Silence settled between us. Not heavy, reflective, she exhaled slowly. "I came today because I realized something. I waited. For years, I defined success by visibility. If something wasn't admired publicly, I assumed it lacked value." She turned toward me. "But this changes lives without needing applause." I didn't respond immediately. I had learned that silence invites sincerity. When I watched you at the Capitol," she continued. "I thought the applause was the point." "It wasn't," I said gently. "I know that now." She moved toward the small chair opposite my desk. "May I sit?" "Wes?" She folded her hands in her lap. She said unexpectedly, "At a community literacy center." That caught me off guard. "In Richmond?" I asked. "Wes!" "Why?" "Because I wanted to understand what you see every day." That sentence landed somewhere deeper than I expected. "I'm not good at it yet," she admitted softly. I correct too quickly. "I measure too much, but I'm learning." Learning, the same word Lily had used. "You don't have to do that to prove anything to me," I said. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm doing it because I finally see what I dismissed." I leaned back slightly in my chair. 4 years ago she had erased me to protect her image. Now she was stepping into the very world she once considered beneath her. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I realized," she said slowly, "that if I wanted to stay in your life, I needed to respect the foundation of it. Not tolerate. Not politely acknowledge. Respect." That difference mattered. We sat quietly for a moment. Then she looked at Lily's drawing. "She drew that? Wes?" "It's simple." A faint smile crossed her face. "I used to complicate everything." I didn't argue. She stood after a few minutes. "I won't take more of your time." "You're not," I said. At the door, she paused. "I don't expect gratitude for trying," she added. "I'm not offering it for that reason." "I know," I replied. After she left, I remained seated for a long moment. The office felt the same, but something inside me had shifted again. Not softened, not fully healed, adjusted. Later that evening I told Marcus about the visit. "She volunteered?" he asked, surprised. "To understand you?" "Yes." He leaned back thoughtfully. "That's not small." "No," I agreed. "It isn't. But change does not erase history. It coexists with it." That night, Lily asked if Grandma could come to her school reading day next month. Then answered honestly, "If she continues listening, yes." The next week, my mother attended the literacy center again. Rachel confirmed it. "She's awkward," Rachel said, "but she shows up." Showing up, that had always been the measure. Not prestige. Not applause. Not curated success. Presence. When reading day arrived, my mother sat in the back row of Lily's classroom. Not near the teacher. Not near the other parents. Just present. She didn't take photos. She didn't announce herself. She listened as Lily read aloud with steady confidence. Afterward, she hugged her gently. "I'm proud of you," she said. Not loudly, not for others to hear, just enough. Driving home, I realized something important. The governor thanking me on live television had forced my mother to confront her public behavior. But it was the absence of cameras that tested her private change. And private change, quiet, unseen, unapplauded, is the only kind that lasts. For the first time, I wasn't measuring her against who she used to be. I was measuring her against consistency. And consistency, unlike reputation, cannot be staged. The second year after the Capitol ceremony passed without spectacle. No viral clips, no public confrontations. No dramatic reconciliations, just seasons, winter budgets, spring testing, summer planning, fall harvests. Life returned to its steady rhythm, and that, more than anything, told me we were no longer living inside a reaction. We were living inside choice. My mother continued volunteering at the literacy center, not consistently at first, then more regularly. Rachel would send quiet updates. "She stayed an extra hour today." "She brought snacks for the kids." She didn't correct anyone this time. Small things, but small things compound. One evening in early October, I invited her to the farmhouse for dinner. Not a holiday, not an occasion, just a Tuesday. That decision felt more significant than the public moments, because holidays can disguise performance. Ordinary days reveal truth. She arrived with a simple casserole, no elaborate wine, no grand entrance. Marcus greeted her politely. Lily dragged her toward the barn to show her the new kittens. From the kitchen window, I watched the two of them crouch in the hay, Lily animated, my mother attentive, no camera, no audience. Just presence. When we sat down to eat, conversation moved easily. School updates, farm repairs, a new teacher hire in the district. At one point my mother turned to Marcus. You've built something steady here, she said. He nodded modestly. We try. Then she looked at me. I'm glad she chose this life. Chosen, not tolerated, not endured. Chosen. Years ago, she would have said, I suppose this works for you. Now the tone carried something different. Respect. After dinner, Lily insisted on reading aloud again. She had grown more confident, fewer pauses, clearer projection. When she finished, she looked expectantly at her grandmother. Well, Lily asked, Lee, you're becoming very brave with your voice. Brave. Not talented. Not impressive. Brave. The nuance mattered. Later, as Marcus washed dishes and Lily prepared for bed, my mother and I stood alone on the porch. The oak tree loomed quietly in the yard. This is where you got married, she asked. Wes. She nodded. I wasn't ready then? I know. Silence settled, not tense, not fragile. Just shared. I used to think I had to control the narrative, she said quietly. If people admired my children, I felt secure. When you stepped outside that image, I panicked. You erased me, I said calmly. Yes. No defense. No excuse. Just acknowledgement. And when the governor thanked you, she continued, I realized I had tried to step into a story I didn't help write. That sentence stayed with me. Stories. Ownership. Credit. I don't need you to rewrite the past, I said finally. I can't, she replied. But I can choose how I behave in the present. That was enough. Not perfection. Not erasure of harm. Just commitment to consistency. When she left that evening, she didn't linger. She hugged Lily, shook Marcus's hand. Thank you, she said. For what? For letting me stay carefully? Carefully? Yes. Because staying now had terms. Boundaries remained intact. Access remained gradual. Respect remained non-negotiable. Months later, the state released updated literacy statistics. Clark County continued trending upward. The mentorship model was officially embedded into statewide policy. I received another invitation to speak at the Capitol. This time it felt different. Not corrective. Not defiant, just professional. My mother didn't ask to attend, she sent a short message instead. Proud of you. 2 words. No conditions. No qualifiers. No optics, just proud. I looked at the message for a long time. 4 years ago she had written, I no longer see her as my daughter. Now she wrote, proud of you. The difference between those sentences wasn't volume, it was growth. That evening I sat under the oak tree alone. The air cool. The sky turning amber. I thought about the girl I had been when the group chat screenshot first reached my phone. The shock. The stillness. The decision to disappear rather than beg. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her this. Being disowned did not define you. It revealed you. It forced you to build without applause. It taught you the difference between validation and value. The governor thanking me on live television was never the real turning point. It was symbolic. The real turning point happened long before. The morning I decided I would not shrink to remain loved. Family, I've learned, is not about who claims you when cameras are on. It's about who listens when they're off. My parents disowned me for being a lowly teacher. But I built a life that didn't require their approval. And when they finally learned how to stay, they did so without taking center stage. That's what family means now. Not perfection. Not prestige. Presence. Call consistent. Chosen.